Hello again, my name is Doctrzombie, and today I'm going to be demonstrating how to move a established young colony from an ordinary test tube setup into this new thing that I've purchased from Tar Heel Ants, which is a Genesis setup for a test tube. Now, I've purchased the full kit here, which includes the feeding tray and then comes with a little stand to prevent your test tube from rolling around as it kind of did there. So the test tube will go on the stand. But the Genesis founding test tube chamber is $6.99 on their store page. And essentially it's an insert for a test tube. When you purchase one of these, they'll give you the test tube for free. So what we're going to need to do to set this thing up is we're going to need 2 cotton balls, the Genesis chamber, and some water. That's the basic way to set up the test tube. So what I've done here is I've kind of lined up the test tube with the feeding attachment here and the Genesis chamber here to kind of get an idea for how much water I'll be able to use. Now, according to Mac, the store's owner, a lot less water is going to be needed for this setup because of the way that the Genesis chamber draws moisture in and kind of prevents it from evaporating like my setup here. So you'll notice if I put the existing setup here, I've used most of the tube for water, and it's been about a month, maybe 2 months, and the water is half gone. And a lot of times when I use systems like this, the cotton ball gets moldy with black mold or something else, and you can kind of see some mold beginning to form there. And this is a young colony that I believe is Nylandaria. It may be Monomorium. I'm not sure, I haven't had it identified yet, but it is a tiny, tiny species. You can kind of see some of the workers there. She's got, let's see if I can get into focus, probably not because they're so damn small. So there's the queen, and there's at least one worker. Extremely tiny. This is a normal size test tube. Let's see if I can get a better angle. Not really, because there's some mold starting to grow in there. So basically, I want to move them out before any more injury can occur to them due to the situation they're in. But now that she's had a couple brood, and I've fed them a little bit of a superworm head, I'm hoping to move them into a better chamber and give them a better shot at forming a stable colony. So I'm going to take the test tube and start the water process. So I've lined it up here so I can see exactly how much space I've got left. I could mark it down here, but I think I can pretty much estimate where that's going to be without too much trouble. So I'll come back after I've filled it up with water. All right, once I have placed a little bit of water in the tube, I insert the cotton ball. And I like to use this tool I've got here. This is just a standard drill bit that is long enough that it fits through the entire tube. And it's got a nice broad flat section at the bottom, which I can use to ram down the cotton ball. Seems to work pretty well. Now, I overfilled this originally because I'm not used to using such a little amount of water, but I was able to just insert the Genesis chamber into it, push it down, see that I didn't quite have enough room for it plus the feeding tube, feeding insert. So I was just able to press it down a little bit further with the ramrod and then drain the water out. So it is a little extra moist in there right now. As you can see, I've got a little water on the table because of what I did. But it will be effective. At this point, I've got it. It's a little humid, but that shouldn't be an issue. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and insert this here. And just go ahead and plug it right into the tube. Slides in nice and easy. And put it right up against the cotton ball. To make sure that I've got enough space for when I use the feeding chamber, I go ahead and push that in right up to it. And they line up real nice. That way the ants won't try to get underneath it or anything like that. Now, as I mentioned before, I'm using a very tiny species here, so I'm not quite sure how well this will work. It's designed for slightly larger species, but it looks like it fits pretty snug in the test tube provided. If I go ahead and plug that with this cotton ball here, it'll actually be pretty tight. So when I go in, I remove the feeding tube here. I put some honey mixture that I use in the little feed chamber there and press this in, load in the cotton ball. It'll fit quite snugly, and I don't think the ants are going to escape, especially with there not being much of a gap between the Genesis chamber and the feeding thing. But I don't need it now. What I really need to do now is move the colony from their existing cozy home here. Let's see if I can get a... Yeah, it's just going to be blurry as shit. I'll be able to really get a good look at them. But they're in there. Or maybe if I... Well, I'll do that in a minute. I need to move them from that tube into this one. And to do that, I'm simply going to tape the two together with painter's tape. This is good because it doesn't leave a residue behind when you peel it away. This is kind of an old roll here. It's got a little bit of warping going on, but it should still work. I'll just connect the tubes together, tape them together, and then either if I want to move them a little bit quicker, I can shine a bright light on this side, cover this other half up with some kind of paper, or I use red tissue paper because ants supposedly can't see red light, so you can kind of see through it, and they can't. But even without coercing them, they should find this more acceptable to them, especially because of the mold and stuff growing in here. And they'll move over eventually anyway. So why don't I go ahead, I'm going to remove, actually, why don't I do this here? So there's a bit of debris in here. I'm going to remove that quick because I need my extra hand to do that. And then I'll see if I can get a better view of the ants that are in here. Debris, opened it up, and you can see these teeny tiny ants in there. It looks like I can see 3 workers. Maybe I can zoom in a bit here. I'm doing this all one-handed. Oh yeah, that's much better. Yeah, I believe I can see 3 baby workers there and what looks like some eggs are brood there. So I'd like to move them into a more stable habitat, something that's less likely to be moldy, more likely to work for them long term, and allow me to see them better. So that's why I'm trying to move them into the Genesis chamber. So let me go ahead and tape these up and see how it looks. Okay, so something I didn't quite expect is that the plastic test tubes that I have been using, because they're inexpensive, actually are smaller than the glass test tubes that I received from Tar Heel. And they can actually fit inside, not quite snugly, but enough that I actually feel pretty confident that there's a bit of an overlap inside there where the test tubes connect. And then I've taped around it. I don't think ants are going to really try to escape that. If they do, I don't think they're going to get too far. Hopefully it won't damage any of the workers. But now I've got a situation where I've got this section over here where the ants are currently living, and they can move into this much nicer one. So in order to prevent rolling around and kind of level things out so that it's properly standing, I'm going to use this little piece here that came with my kit. Now, I got this free when I purchased both the feeding chamber and the Genesis chamber. So if I go ahead and set this up here, just slide it through, I suppose. Hold on. There we go. I can stand it up nice and steady where it should be to give this whole thing a flat board. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to leave it this way overnight. I'm not going to apply any heat or light to them. I'm hoping that they will find and relocate on their own. And then I'll be able to detach the old tube, remove it, and then feed them because they're probably quite hungry since it's been a few days since they've had anything to eat. But I'm hoping that they'll move overnight with no trouble. So I'll let you know how it turns out in a future video.